Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a metric that keeps HR leaders up at night: attrition. But we aren't just looking at the absolute numbers today. We're unpacking this through a highly specific gender lens. We're going to see exactly how modern organizations track the complex flow of their workforce to really get a handle on fairness and retention.
And that brings us straight to the exact, pretty provocative question from our source material that companies are absolutely desperate to answer. Which gender had highest drain of talent? It's a heavy question, right? I mean, when people leave a company, it's never just an empty desk. It's a literal drain of institutional knowledge, skills, and forward momentum. By explicitly asking this specific question, organizations aren't just looking at generic numbers. They're actively trying to figure out if there are systemic underlying issues that are disproportionately pushing a specific demographic out the door.
So moving into Section 1, defining total attrition.
The absolute crucial first step here is establishing our baseline. That's our total attrition. Think of this as the macro-level view of your departing workforce. Our source defines this clearly as the overall volume of employees leaving the organization before any granular splits happen. It is the foundational number you literally have to have before any further analysis can even begin. A lot of companies make the mistake of digging into scattered exit interviews without even knowing this baseline. But you really can't grasp the nuance of who is leaving until you have a rock-solid grip on the absolute total of how many are leaving overall. It's the mathematical anchor for everything that follows.
Which brings us to the core action dictated by our framework. We're taking that massive, overarching concept of total attrition on the left and intentionally splitting it apart into distinct categories on the right, specifically by gender. This right here is the exact moment raw data transforms into actionable insight. By making this comparison, an organization moves from simply saying, well, people are leaving, to truly understanding the demographic makeup of that departing workforce. It's the essential first step in diagnosing any potential imbalances in company culture or retention strategies.
Now on to Section 2, analyzing the gender divide. I want you to notice the emphasis on the word calculate from the source material. It explicitly states to calculate the total attrition gender-wise. That tells us tracking this divide isn't just some passive observation, it's a rigorous mathematical process. HR professionals and data analysts aren't just guessing who's leaving based on a gut feeling, they're running strict calculations. This deliberate math is what empowers leadership to make informed, objective decisions instead of just relying on workplace anecdotes.
And I really want to pause on this phrasing from the text, the drain of talent. It is incredibly intentional. By isolating those words, we can truly grasp the gravity of what this data represents for an organization. We aren't just talking about turnover or departures, which sounds so sterile and operational. A drain implies a continuous, exhausting depletion of a highly valuable resource. For an organization, losing its workforce is literally draining its lifeblood and its competitive edge in the market. Measuring this gender-wise helps pinpoint exactly where the leak in the pipeline might be happening.
Let's move to Section 3, tracking time and calculating the ratios. To answer our big question, the text specifically points to the ratio as the necessary mathematical output to make sense of those total attrition numbers. But why a ratio? Well, raw numbers alone can be super deceiving. Think about it. If 10 men and 10 women leave a company, the raw numbers look perfectly equal, right? But what if the overall company is made up of 80% men and only 20% women? In that scenario, the ratio of female attrition relative to their total population is actually dangerously high. The ratio is the definitive comparative relationship that normalizes the data. It's the only way analysts can accurately and honestly track the true gender divide. To actually build this successfully, you need 3 key ingredients working together. First, your total attrition figure. Next, you apply the categorization by gender to split that pool. And finally, you run the ratio calculation to understand the true proportional impact. If you miss even one of these elements, the whole framework just falls apart. It's a beautifully simple yet structurally rigorous methodology for HR data analysis.
Of course, data is really only as good as the context of time in which it is measured. The source maps out a very strict chronological timeline for tracking these ratios: 1 month, 3 months, and 12 months, or basically monthly, quarterly, and yearly. By establishing these exact intervals, the framework ensures an organization isn't just taking a static snapshot. You're monitoring a continuous flowing trend. A monthly view might catch a sudden volatile reaction to a new internal policy, while a yearly view smooths out all those anomalies to reveal the long-term systemic patterns in how talent is retained. Visualizing it like this shows exactly how your specific time frame pairs directly with the output, that critical calculated gender ratio. It turns a basic HR audit into a sustained strategic dashboard. Business leaders can compare Q1 against Q2 or this November against last November. They are constantly and rigorously checking the pulse of their talent drain to see if their interventions are actually, working.
Which brings us right back to our core driving inquiry. Which gender had highest drain of talent? By continuously tracking these ratios over time, monthly, quarterly, and yearly, an organization can finally answer this question with pure empirical certainty. It's no longer a matter of guessing. If the data consistently shows a higher ratio of a specific gender leaving quarter over quarter, the organization has unearthed a massive, actionable red flag regarding their workplace environment. The data framework we've explored today is the flashlight needed to illuminate that reality.
I want to leave you with this final, vital command from the core of today's text. Measure your drain of talent. As we wrap up this explainer, I challenge you to think about how your own organization categorizes, calculates, and truly understands its workforce dynamics. Are they just looking at a generic total headcount, or are they doing the rigorous work of digging into the ratios to see who is truly leaving and why? Understanding attrition gender-wise isn't just some basic HR exercise. It is a critical, revealing measure of an organization's health, equity, and future viability. Because honestly, if your best talent is draining away unmeasured, how long can you really stay competitive?